Ben, my friend, we're back again. No
Good
One Fights
morning.
Alone podcast. How are you, man?
Good, man. Good, man. Glad to be here.
Well, I'm excited about today's guest. This is really cool.
Yeah. No, I've been following this guy for a long time. I'm a huge fan, and he has got the ability to be incredibly tough, formidable, really intelligent, and all the things that I think alphas aspire to be. And he's got this cool ability to bring in kind of the heart of what's going on in a situation and what's going on for people. Yeah, I just love the way he formulates some of his ideas.
Well, he is a fascinating human being. I've pretty new to getting to know him. We've had several phone conversations that have been, but instead of talking around him, let me just tee it up. This is Chip Huth, former SWAT commander up in Kansas City, Missouri. And he's a badass, man. We had some great conversations early on, but since, we're teeing up the entire conversation, we just got done completing this nearly 2-hour conversation. Right. Sorry, folks, it's going to be long, but you all are going to love this. I think our listeners are going to find this fascinating.
No, I think so, because I think there's many nuggets of just cool things you can sit and kind of ponder on for a while, regardless of where you're at. Whether it's, I just had an argument with my wife, I'm tired and discouraged at work, whatever parenting situations, just in general, I thought there was a little piece that would just gives someone, a little something that might actually provide a little bit of direction of what they can do next.
I think at home was covered. I think at work was covered. I think if you're having trouble with a supervisor, this is a platform, a listen that you could take away and say, maybe I could look at this a little bit different. Maybe I can see something a little bit different. And I don't want to take away from the podcast itself, but maybe a different lens.
I think it'll send folks down, I'll use the term rabbit hole, but between the books that were talked about or some of these organizations, there's people could explore this for a while and do some real good.
Yeah. And we're going to be referencing Arbinger Institute, which is amazing organization, and their cause there, their paradigm is pretty amazing. So folks, we're going to head on into it. Enjoy the conversation with Chip, and we will see you on the other side. Thanks for listening. Love you guys.
See ya.
Welcome to the No One Fights Alone podcast. This podcast is dedicated to mental wellness for first responders and beyond. Through powerful stories, personal experiences, and expert insights, we explore the challenges and triumphs of maintaining resilience in the face of adversity. Together, we remind you, no one fights alone.
Hey, welcome back to No One Fights Alone podcast. We have Charles Chip Huth with us today, Major, retired Kansas City Police Department. He is a SWAT commander, court-certified expert witness in police operations and reasonable force, senior consultant with Arbinger Institute, and the president and CEO of CDH Consulting. Good morning, Chip. Welcome to the podcast, man.
Good morning, Brad. Ben, good to see you.
Man, how are you? I think you were traveling. One of the last times you and I talked on the phone, you were out of country on a vacay.
Was it been that long ago?
I think it's been a minute. I think was that January? It's been a while.
Goodness gracious. Yeah, it would have been a year ago, January, the last vacation I actually permitted myself to take.
Man, that has been a while. Well, welcome to the podcast, man. We're happy to have you here, and we just want to dive right in. Tell us a little bit about who you are. Give us a little bit of framework here.
Who I am. I'm retired, as you mentioned, from the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department. I did serve there for 30 years, and my expertise was building and leading SWAT teams. I had the privilege to lead the most active SWAT team in the nation for over a decade at the tactical level. And before I retired, I actually served as the Special Operations Division Commander. So that's the commander that commands the entire SOD. So I had an opportunity to serve at every rank. within the SWAT teams, which was an honor. And yeah, I mean, I, as you know now, work full time for the Arbinger Institute. I serve as a senior consultant and just basically get to travel around sharing this leadership philosophy, this philosophy of culture change that my teammates at Arbinger have worked so hard to develop and qualify over 4 decades, actually. So it's been it's a joy. It's a joy to get to do it.
You know, it's been my experience that within law enforcement, and that's where most of my experience is housed. And I've noticed that many people, especially retired, they have notable things about their career that don't get spotlight. There's usually one or two things that really it maybe touched their heart. It may have some type of an endearing moment with them. That do you have any of those? Do you have one or two of those things that just, you know, the resume looks like, you know, ABC 1, 2, 3, but oftentimes there's this one or two little, like, something. It obviously is something because I just saw a twinkle in your eye. There's something. What is that?
Well, the twinkle is probably a testimony or a testament to the fact that there's so many. But, you know, in my mind, and this seems kind of like a catch-all, we could spend 3 days just talking about individual relationships I developed with people that I had the opportunity to lead and work with. You know, I'll spotlight just one of many, and that's Andy Kyle. He was a former Marine and longtime SWAT officer. He served as my assistant team leader when I worked with the Special Operations Division, the actually Special Investigation Division, Tactical Enforcement Team. And Andy was one of those guys. He never sought promotion, but he was so influential in just his way of being with other people. He had a presence about him. He paid attention. He was discerning. He was compassionate. And he wouldn't say that, right? He wouldn't qualify the way he showed up as compassionate. But that's the best word I know for it. He had a gift for knowing when to step up and interject. I'm the kind of guy I think through articulation sometimes, so I probably talk a lot more than I need to. Probably use 12 words where 2 will do. Andy had mastered the art of saying just enough. And the reason that relationship jumped out at me when you asked that question is because it was so inspirational for me. I continue even today to think back and recall times we were together where he modeled the type of leadership that I always wanted to embody. And so those relationships are so incredibly valuable to me. I will tell you with Andy, even though I promoted through the ranks to executive command, and he didn't, he stayed at the same level for his entire career, I still scheduled regular lunches with him just to pick his brain, just to talk with him, just to learn from him. So just one of many relationships that I'll highlight. And then also I would say the best time that I spent in my entire 30 years was the decade plus that I spent with that team. And watching their transformation from the most complained on unit in the entire organization to completely eliminating complaints while tripling gun and drug seizures and felony arrests. To watch that happen, right? Like just to watch the men, they were all men at the time, to watch them fully embrace this philosophy, this way of working with other people that recognized their humanity, but still didn't tolerate the law breaking and misconduct, right? They ensured that the people who broke the law were responsible for and faced the natural consequence of their decisions, but they didn't judge their character in unhelpful ways, right? They didn't mistreat them or abuse them or serve as a proxy for those consequences. Just watching that happen in that team, watching that change and the way that it changed me, those two things just jump out to me right away.
How important is it to have an Andy in your life?
Well, if you're like me, Brad, you need more than one. But I would say it's of critical importance. Somebody that, you know, an accountability partner, they can give you buddy checks. You know, it's coming from a place of love and caring. You have high trust. You know what they're saying to you. They don't have a hidden agenda. It's not self-serving. To have somebody like that. And by the way, and I'm not telling you or Ben anything, but if you desire to have those type of relationships, you have to cultivate them. They don't just happen, right? Those relationships are grown over a period of time, you know, going through adversity together and working on improving the way you communicate and share and care. But no, in answer to your question, there goes the 12 words where 2 will do. I would say absolutely critical. Those are my 2 words.
Don't you feel like that's a mutual investment within that relationship? I mean, oftentimes people take this, and I know we're chasing a little bit of rabbit here, but I feel like we're onto something really, really special here, because I think there's a lot of people out there that just don't understand the importance of having that, whatever you want to call it, a battle buddy, a go-to guy, a check down guy, somebody that can pick up the phone and say, man, I'm twisted up. Like I need somebody taking a real honest look at what's going on here, or I need some advice. I need some wisdom. I need, I got work's going sideways, or my kids are going sideways. My marriage is on the rocks a little bit, and a guy shows up, sits down, and, I've had the great honor of having several men in my life like that. And still to this day have a guy in Denver, Colorado that going on 30 years is a go-to guy for me. I mean, it doesn't matter if I pick up the phone and it's been 2 days or 2 weeks. It's like our conversation never ends.
Yeah.
And man, he's a straight shooting dude. And I to him. To your point is, you have to invest in this. So yeah, what a great point, man, of stuff that's not on the resume, right? This is stuff that people just don't see of how special a career can be in first responder and law enforcement or firefighter, just because it is a lot about the relationships.
Yeah. Well, it's ironic that you think about those resumes, they're kind of like a lead in, but it doesn't give you the texture of a human being, right? It doesn't give you a sense of who they really are, because, you and I and Ben, we could all attend the same schools and get the same degrees and work in the same profession. But the way we show up in that work and in that education and our relationships, really, I think that better defines who we are in the world. It's funny you mentioned Denver, Colorado. My best friend in the world, Chad Hill, he happens to be my cousin. He actually owns a commercial construction business in the Denver area. And I was curious if it was the same guy. Like, do we have the same best buddy?
I don't think so.
He's a dynamo, man. And he's such a force of integrity when it comes to the way he runs his business, and just the way he is as a person. And, he will 100% call me on my BS and give me that buddy check. And I for him too. And we have some of the deepest conversations. And the thing is, it's all predicated on this unconditional love for one another.
Right.
I know sometimes guys, they don't want to talk about that, right? It sounds soft, or, maybe it sounds mamby-pamby to say, we love each other, but it's this deep love and regard and respect he has for me. I know Chad has my best interest in mind all the time. Like he's always thinking about, what can I contribute to this relationship that can help Chip? And I'm that way for him. And I think that he senses that. So, we met, we were already teenagers when we met. And it was like this kind of immediate click. I've had relationships like this in my life where it seems like they just fall into place almost immediately, where you're like, this person, right? Something about them resonates with my soul. And Chad's like that. And, I think, yeah. Well, just when you said Colorado, immediately, right? Anytime anybody says Colorado, I go to Chad, and just what a role model for me, man. What a great man.
No, his name is Gary Thornberry. We partnered back in the day. He knows where, he knows some shit on me, and I on him, right? But that was back when I was a baby trooper and before I got SWAT and promoted and all that. I mean, we promoted together, not in the same divisions. We just, but there was. I don't know that there was so much intentionality on it early. I mean, we were investing in each other, but I think the later years now there's much more intentionality about it. The quality of our conversations now are so much different about, how's life? How are you? How you doing? And, I tell people I love them now more than ever. Maybe part of that's my old age. I don't know. But the reality of it is, to your point, men do need that connection. And again, we're chasing a rabbit here, but COVID pulled us away from each other so much. And we saw, if there was no more greater example of this, why we need relationships and bonds than what happened. You could visibly watch people be destroyed in their loneliness through the course of that. But there's just a special bond that's created in that first responder space as well, because you're working together so much and you're on a common mission and you're hitting life and death situations, and it's pretty amazing. So thanks for opening the door for that. That's a neat little road to travel down for a minute. I think this would be a good segue to actually to go into. You mentioned your Kansas City SWAT. I do want to spend a little bit of time on there, building up kind of where we go with the conversation of, tell us a little bit about that. I mean, you had some real problems back in the day, and you were a ground floor guy, right? You started, you were the runt rookie, probably a bad nickname. and hazed, the whole thing, same thing. I've been there, done that. I can't say my name on the air. I'll just say that.
Yeah. It's funny. It's funny, Brad. I never really experienced hazing. I was tougher than woodpecker lips when I came into the police department, but it was in a way that I think I pushed people away with my attitude. My attitude was, there's no fight, too big, there's nothing I can't handle. I came up a little rough. At least for for part of my life. I was born to a father who was a career criminal and a clinical psychopath. And my mother she suffered from bipolar and schizophrenia her entire life. And I was homeless when I was born in Columbus, Ohio. And so I was homeless off and on for the first 11, 12 years of my life. I was rescued, me and my siblings, the siblings that had same mom, same dad. There were 4 of us, and we were rescued by my uncle, who was a law enforcement officer and a veteran. And he basically rescued us from our dad and got us to mid-Missouri. And I worked on the farm, from age 11 on, clearing fence line by myself, a lot of hours by myself, hauling hay for a nickel a bale, cleaning turkey houses. I mean, man, like it was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, I think. Even harder than anything in the Army. At least in the Army, you could sit on your rucksack, have an MRE, and
right.
catch your breath sometimes, I guess. But at the farm, you just work until you're done.
Right. And you're never done.
And you were never done. Yeah. It's yeah. Especially, by the way, shout out to dairy farmers. I never did that, but like, when do those folks go on vacation? Forget about it.
I was raised a dairy kid.
You really?
Yeah. Yeah. That was everything you just threw out there. I experienced, I was in school before I figured out other kids didn't get up at 6 o'clock in the morning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Some people got it good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and by the way, thank you and your family as a consumer of all things dairy. Thank you very much for the hard work you do. Yeah. It's amazing. So I guess what I'm saying is that my experience was a little unique in the sense that I went in the Army at 17. I was promoted to E5, field promoted at 19. So I hadn't even gone to BNOC or PLDC or any of that. I guess it was what you might call a merit promotion, not frocking, but an actual promotion. And I was just kind of a rough dude. I don't know. Like I never experienced people tried a little bit at first to haze me, but I was pretty stubborn, so by the time I got to SWAT, my reputation was pretty well set, and people were, it was mild, I would say, right? Anything in the way of hazing. But yeah, I went in, I knew I wanted to be part of a team like that. Like, the reason I went to Kansas City was it was the largest SWAT team in the nation at the time, 60 full-time members. So 60 people that do nothing but SWAT. Most teams, as you know, it's kind of an ad hoc assignment, right? An ancillary assignment. This is all SWAT all the time. Lots of training, lots of ammunition to practice at the range, lots of missions, actually. Lots of missions. When I went to SNU, to the specialized unit that we were talking about, the specialized element of SWAT, they had came off their busiest year of search warrant execution. They had served over 800 high-risk search warrants with 14 members. So do the math on that. 800 in a year with only 14 members, right? You're kicking doors every day, multiple times a day, and some long days, busy team. And so when I came in there, I was essentially put there by a deputy chief. And I will say something about this deputy chief. Her name was Rachel Whipple. She was in charge of the investigations bureau, and this team was nested under that bureau. The rest of SWAT is nested under patrol bureau, where SWAT normally is, right? Or like in LA, they got their own platoon and metro, right? But she recognized that social media was becoming a thing and that the impact of law enforcement wasn't going to be localized anymore. And this team, for a long time, the damage they left in their wake was tolerated because they seized a lot of guns and drugs and arrested a lot of people. And it was kind of like the old school mentality was, well, you can't make an omelet without breaking some eggs. They're going to get complaints and all of that because of the kinetic nature of their work. Well, she recognized, look, whatever we can do to manage these complaints and lawsuits is in our best interest, especially considering that, once social media gets rolling, what's news in Kansas City is going to be news in LA and New York. And this is, this team's representing our brand with the most challenging members of our community. So she sent me in there kind of as a hatchet man. Like, you need to go in there and clean house. And that was kind of the attitude I had was my leadership style back then, much like my parenting style, was best characterized as close distance apply force. Mm-hmm. I go in right with both barrels. And of course, these are all men, again, all men at the time that that do 100 pull-ups for breakfast. They're not particularly intimidated by me, but I'm the boss, right? So as the team leader there, and clearly because I was put there by a deputy chief, I've got some political sway, right?
Right.
So they kind of gotta fall in line, and I mean they fell in line, but I learned a lesson. You guys already know this, Ben and Brad. You know this. People can build their resistance to you into their obedience. They can do the things you're telling them to do in such a maniacal way it undermines your intent, right? So, like, you want me to search thoroughly, and next thing you know, they're spending an hour on a closet.
Yep.
And right, yeah. And so, I mean, they can do things, they can do things to undermine you completely while following the letter of what you're telling them to do.
Very
So
creative.
that was yeah, very creative. Oh, especially, look, I always like to try to blur the distinctions between law enforcement and other community members because we are much more alike than we are different. But there is something about law enforcement, man. It just attracts some creative people, to your point. They find all kinds of interesting ways to get things done. I guess it's because, most of them are problem solvers by nature, right? And that's what they're attracted to the profession. A lot of them are default aggressive. A lot of them are that. Maybe less so these days. We attract a more diverse, group of people now coming into law enforcement. But certainly, even when I came in 91, it was a lot of ex-military, a lot of folks like that were coming in. But yeah, that was my challenge. Honestly, my biggest challenge was my attitude. My attitude was these men are all chess pieces on a board that I can manipulate to achieve my objective. And make no mistake about it, one of my objectives was turning the team around, but my primary objective was looking good to my boss. And I think they sensed that, right? They sensed that I was just using them as a means to an end, and that contributed to the resistance that I felt. So,
hey, Chip, can you comment just for a second there about how that looked at home? Obviously, it's going to be a little bit different, but I'm curious as you talk about attitude, about what it was like back in those early 90s as you engage with kids and maybe their ages a little bit.
Well, so I think all marriages have struggle because you're so vulnerable in a marriage, right? Like, I mean, whether you want to be or not, you are, because you've got a person who, a person who sees you in all your guises, and they see through you, by the way. They're around you so much. Like, you can't keep up this facade that you might keep up in certain contexts with people. Like, I could walk in for an hour, I could put on a show and, have people think whatever I want to think about me. But man, when you're married, I think that there's just no way that you can have that avatar interacting day to day without people seeing through it. So I would say that my general attitude was one of resentment, and I felt everybody was going to take advantage of me. I had to look out for myself. No one else would. And that colored my perception of my marriage. And, I wrecked a couple marriages to a couple of really good women. And then you mentioned the kids. Well, like, my dad beat me like I owed him money and left me on the street. Right. So I thought if I just fed my kids and clothed my kids and made sure they obeyed the rules, I thought I was like dad of the year.
Sure.
And I completely neglected, this is an emotional, right? What we're talking about is really emotional, not just for me, but for probably people listening, because, I'm not on an island here, am I? Right. Like, I thought, like, I'm going to work all the time. Why? To provide for my family. Why? So they don't have to be poor like I was. Really, why? Well, because I'm much more comfortable dealing with strangers in these difficult situations than I am opening my heart, right, to my family, because it might get stomped on. I might be, some way I might be manipulated, or I might, look like an idiot when I get it wrong. So I just disengaged. I wasn't accessible. So by the time I went to the SWAT team, as the leader there, I was already in the middle of my second divorce, or, it was leading up to that, right? We were going through some trouble, and my kids wouldn't talk to me. My teenage boys wouldn't speak to me, right? I mean, it was like a very, transactional relationship. And I'll be honest with you, Ben, I only spoke with them when there was a problem.
Right.
Like, you do, you get in trouble at school, you're going to get in trouble with dad. And, I was on autopilot. Like, there's no book on parenting. I just thought that's the way it is. Right. Like, and I swung at him with my heart, brother. Like, I swung at him with my heart. I didn't hit him physically. I think I spanked both my boys. Maybe I can count on one hand the amount of time I spanked both of them. And I'm I don't even believe in that anymore. Like, it's nonsensical to hit somebody to tell them like, like, I'm doing this for your own good. I don't think so, man. I've been hit a lot. It's never been, maybe sparring and kickboxing. It was for my own good. Like, keep your guard up, stuff like that. But yeah. But anyway, I'm telling people how to parent. Some people still believe that, spanking their kids is fine. And plenty of schools of thought on that. My point being, I wasn't a spanker. I was just totally inaccessible as a human being. And, well, it's rough, man. It was rough. And to this day, I'm still working on those relationships with my boys. I still am. And it's so much better, right? But they're adults. I mean, you're talking about, my Christopher's 34, Brandon's 32. Brandon's married. I'm getting ready to see him tomorrow. Actually, I'm flying to Germany after flying to Germany. What is today? Flying to Germany tomorrow morning. So I'm going to see him and his wife.
Oh, that's great.
I've got some work to do over there, and I built in some time to be with him, and Chris and I see each other, once a week, once every couple of weeks. But man, it's so far. You mentioned family, man. It's so behind the curve because those formative years, those years when they really needed to be able to count on me, and not just for food and clothes, right? You guys know. Are you guys parents?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I've got a couple, and Ben's got a basketball team.
That's what I call an irresponsible amount. It's only 5.
Well, no, if you're reading the news, if you're paying attention, we actually have a dearth of births. It was really hard for me to come up with a word that rhymed with birther, but we have a dearth of births. Yeah, there's like they're now talking about ways to encourage people to have more children to incentivize it.
Mm-hmm.
I just read this in the news yesterday. Yeah, because in America, you need people. Like, we got to have people to do things, right? And robots can't do it all. But yeah, so I thank you, Ben.
I'm doing my part and some other people's part. That's about it.
No one can say you're not a team player, man. Thank you for your sacrifice, my friend.
Sure, it is sacrifice. Yep.
Brad, you need to pick it up. You need to get on.
Well, I'm having my first grandchild September, so we're working on that too. Yeah, I'm pretty pretty excited.
You're like the youngest looking grandpa in the history of grandpa.
Man, I'm pretty excited about it. I can't wait.
That is amazing.
Yeah, found out we're gonna have a little granddaughter. I'm
my
super
goodness.
excited.
That's awesome.
Yeah, mine are 28 and 30. My boys are 28 and 30.
28 and 30, okay.
Yeah. And if I circle this back, I share a lot of similarities with you in that, but I had just had yesterday, my youngest son and I on the phone, just had the conversations we have today are now full of a lot of meat. There's just so much content with it, and we got really deep in the phone and I took the opportunity just to say how proud I am of you and look where you've come, look what you've accomplished. I mean, he was taking this stance of I've really got some hard things and I'm up against things. So I said, this is a matter of perspective, right? This is we're winners. We've grown through a lot, and here's where you're at. And so my conversations have changed similarly, with that you were speaking of with my children, of just, man, I wish I could have a lot of those years back, but that's futile. It's now the moment of now what? So if I take us back to this kind of this time frame of you're in SWAT, you're doing your thing, and we're building up towards, kind of where we're going with this, leading into a mindset, an entire paradigm change within your organization. Tell us how bad it was. Tell us what, when you really get deep in the shit.
Well, I mean, there were so many things that Colonel Whipple was tracking, but like lawsuits, I mean, you're talking millions of dollars in settlements. They'd settle most of them because some of the stuff just from, part of my work is as an expert witness in federal court, in state court. And I can tell you that sometimes the cost of litigating these things, it's just too much. Even if you are right, the cost of being right is too high. You settle, right? You settle so much when it comes to liability cases. And this team, actually, there was some stuff you wouldn't want to litigate. Like they were so rough and caustic in the way they went about their business that, you don't want that in front of a jury. It's cheaper to settle.
Right.
So you got settlements, you got lawsuits. use of force lawsuits for excessive force where there's big jury awards. They have that going on. The complaints. So you talk about the relational cost of the community complaints is really high. And especially, again, as social media proliferates, because people share their stories, like this cop did this, and then everybody reads it. And they read it without a context, right? They read it from their own context. So, I mean, I can't sit on a plane even to this day, and if it comes up with my seatmate that I was a cop, they don't have a story. Right?
Sure.
Immediately they have a story. Let me tell you about this cop at one time. And it's not always positive.
Right.
A lot of times it'll be negative.
Right.
So we don't realize the impact we have there. So each person they were impacting out in the community in that way created resentment. And then the actual monetary cost of the complaints, you're talking about an official complaint, which most of the complaints are unofficial, right? This is the same in your experience. They're handled at the supervisory level, or some administrative person handles them on the phone. But the complaints that are filed and investigated, $70,000 per complaint at the time. They were averaging, something like 32 complaints a year for that team, like $70,000, $2.5 million over the course of $70,000 per complaint, $2.5 million over the course of a year, $25 million over a decade. So that's a lot of jack, right? So there's a monetary cost to it. And then, the other thing was they had a problem working with other elements in the organization. They were seen kind of as super elite. There was this kind of thing like the SWAT nod, like the SWAT guys wouldn't wave back at you. They just kind of throw their head back like a little nod.
Right.
I always attribute it to the fact that, their arms were so big, like gravity was working against them, right?
Right.
Raised the arm. But there's things like that. So there's some caustic kind of texture to those relationships. So that's kind of what the lay of the land was, if you will. But now the person that I replaced was actually fired and almost indicted. That was the boss. Was actually fired and almost indicted for an excessive force incident. So that was the lay of the land when I stepped in.
And real quick, I got a question before we keep on going. Obviously, this is the geeky therapist question of, we talk with responders all the time. Obviously, we meet them when they're pretty depleted, pretty exhausted. Their mental health has become a bigger part of what their experience is like. I am curious, during this time, as you look back, is there an element of, I don't get why these people don't appreciate me? Or were you content? Were you happy? Or were you overall pushing along and things were going pretty good from your perspective?
So this is a hard question, Ben, really. Because I don't want to go too deep down this rabbit hole, but I want to answer honestly. So at the time, now I've softened over the years, because I think, to Brad's point, I think age has something to do with that, experience has something to do with that. Really caring more about people, if I'm honest, has something to do with that. At the time, I was psychologically predisposed to not be as impacted by those things. I was very egocentric. Again, my dad suffered from psychopathy. Actually, the people around him suffered from it. He was fine with it. I think from a genetic perspective, I've always struggled with empathy. I've always struggled with some of the things that are really essential for close relationships. And so in a way, it hamstrung me when it came to building trust with people, but it actually insulated me from a lot of the psychological side effects of seeing all the trauma, be that, internally, or be that actually the trauma that we see externally. I was actually almost like, I went to in-service one time, and I took a course on tactical communication. And I was like, in the course, we were practicing the tactical communication system they were teaching us and all of this. They talked about open-ended questions and leading questions and all this. And so I did that for a whole day in service. And I picked up my son, Christopher, from school. He was in high school at the time. And I was like, I'm going to practice on him. And, there was something on his mind. You could tell there was something on his mind. He struggled a little bit in high school. He was always so intelligent. But I think with the relationship stuff, right, he struggled there. So something on his mind, I could tell. So I started using this tactic on him, right? And I remember I got around to saying, hey, can you tell me what's wrong, or what's wrong? And he says, nothing, Dad. And I said, so why won't you tell me what's wrong? And he says, well, you wouldn't understand. And I said, well, what makes you think I wouldn't understand? I'm just working the system. And he just staring straight ahead at the dashboard, right? And I could see, from a profile view, I could see that, the tear welling up in the corner of his eye. This big old tear, right? And finally he turns and looks at me and he says, because you're a robot. And that was a moment for me. And I realized like he wasn't responding to the tactics I was using.
Right.
He was responding to how he experienced me as a person, as a father. And I think, honestly, I think his characterization of me as an automaton was probably pretty damn accurate. So circling back to your question, your point, Ben, I was able to, well, I had all the appearances of thriving in that environment of stress.
Yeah.
And it's almost like I fed on it. Like I wanted more of it. I had a quote in my office. It said, "Problems are the price of progress. Bring me nothing but trouble. Good news weakens me." It was like, I'm just going to the gym when you bring me a problem. And by the way, I'll solve all your problems.
Right.
Why? Because you're not a real person. You're not capable of solving your own problems. You need me, right? It's like that Jack Nicholson speech in A Few Good Men, right?
Sure.
You want the Huth? You can't handle the Huth, right? I think he said something like that.
Something like that. No, I think it's a great point. There's a lot of officers that I talk with, and the challenge is what we kind of get to eventually is the training works too well. You've compartmentalized so well that you get to that kind of mindset, and the walls have become so strong. The turret is so reinforced. The reality is, you're totally insulated and right.
Yeah.
That's the nice part about it, is you get to be right.
Getting to being right is intoxicating, isn't it? Feeling right? Feeling right is intoxicating. We never challenge our paradigms when we're in that mindset. When I'm seeing everybody else as competition or a threat or just useful to me, right? There's a means to an end. I'm never seeing the full picture, but it's so comfortable. I mean, answers are simple. 1 + 1 is 2 in my world, right? It's easy. At least it has the appearance of being easy, but the cost of your bad habits are always deferred. Like you never experience them right away. Like if I eat an entire box of Hershey's bars here right now, it's not going to have any kind of an immediate effect. Maybe me a little sleepy, but as far as my health's concerned, right? I mean, I'll go on out and finish my day out. But if I do that regularly for a period of time, down the road, it's going to result in some really bad outcomes for me, health-wise, right? The cost of my bad habits are in the future. The cost of the good habits, like investing in relationships, the things that you and Brad are talking about, those are in the present, and they don't pay off till later. And that's what's so hard about it, right? The immediate gratification isn't there. It's like, what am I doing? Like I've spent time listening and caring and thinking about this person and being considerate, and they're still not responding.
Yeah, and this is what I get. I get a tear.
What I get, yeah. So I just go right back into that virtual reality in which I'm authoring. I'm the author of all things right, and everybody else is wrong. It's like, well, so what Brad said a while ago about being able to say that he loves his friend, right? Being able to express that is a sign of being tough, right? Like acting tough is a 10-minute class. Being tough is a lifelong pursuit. It's a lifelong commitment.
Right.
And now that he's tough and formidable, right? He's got the experience. He's been there, done that. He's comfortable in his own skin. He can be vulnerable. He can say things like, "I love you, brother," and mean it. And that's actually empowering. But when I'm stuck, right? When I've walled myself off from your reality, I don't think that way. I think I'm going to be weak. Oh, if I say I care about people, I'm weak. I've got to be this, right? This version of tough. It's not tough. All it is deferring what's going to happen inevitably. And what happens to a lot of like people on the SWAT teams that I've seen when they're in the team and they're all bound up in this work together and they see each other every day and they're sitting in the team room joking and they're going out for drinks and all that, they're fine.
Mm-hmm.
But then someday that comes to an end. Your knees get bad.
Right.
You age out, and now you find yourself isolated, and all the memories of all the things that you shared, right? You're contending with them alone in a sense, right? People always say, we'll keep in touch, but come on, right? You retire, you leave, they give you a watch or a plaque. Everybody has a party. And then how many of those people really check in on you?
Very few.
How many people do you know that retired or that you're checking in on?
Very few.
Yeah.
Very few.
So then you're all by yourself. Like you feel all by yourself, and you've got to contend with all those things you did that perhaps you compromised your own morality, and it was okay when you had that support and everybody was laughing about it. But now it's not okay. It comes back around. Again, the cost is deferred.
I think that if I can comment on the intoxication of the leadership position you were in, the intoxication of being right, it is really an interesting conversation. For me, I identified with that when I was commander of, I had that, and still sometimes battle that, but there's also an exhaustion that comes with that. So it's such a high level of information processing, this incessant need to have a flow of information coming in so that you are ready to make those decisions at a high level. I felt like that was extremely exhausting as well. I mean, it was at my command, I had 130 people, all units working under my command. And I had to be right all the time. And, you know, if you were wrong on a training op's one thing, but on a real op, that's a whole different story. And I found that to be exhausting, and that permeated into home because I was always right at home, and the real exhaustion came there. I was exhausted. They were exhausted with me, you know, and I didn't necessarily see it at the time, but I certainly see it now, you know, and making strides towards that obviously now. Is that fair?
Yeah, it's so fair. You know, my co-author, Jack Colwell, and I were working with an organization currently, a law enforcement organization that has some culture challenges. And, you know, we were texting about it this morning and talking about it. And, you know, I'm just trying to remind him, and he's trying to remind me, that some things can't be learned vicariously. Like, you have to go through the fire yourself. Like, I wish you could take all your wisdom, Brad, and share it with a 21-year-old, you know, recruit, and they could just absorb it and be like, yeah, right? And they could avoid all that pain and turmoil. But that's an unrealistic expectation to put on somebody that's at that stage of life. But what you can do, and what I think you do consistently, right? I said it's true for you too, Ben, is you can just simply care about them. Right. You know, if your goal is to change them, you can fail. But if your goal is to care about them, you cannot fail. And by doing that, you become more influential than you can possibly imagine. Like, don't you guys have people right now in your life? Like, I mentioned Andy Kyle, right? I mentioned Chad Hill. Don't you have people in your life right now you can call back on where you're like, man, I have a lot of respect for that person.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. They just modeled the way for you, right?
Right.
You're that person now. You're that person for other people in your family and in your work. Like, you know, the way that your sons experience you, Brad, you're modeling for them what it means to be a good man. We could argue about that, by the way. People value different things, but generally speaking, people always say, well, Chip, people value different things. You say good man, good person. What does that mean? Well, I don't know what it means, to be honest with you. I'm limited by my language, just like you are. But I will tell you this: across all cultures, if I talk to somebody, doesn't matter where they're from, and I say, think about the person you admire the most in this world, like picture them in your mind, right? Bring them into reality. Close your eyes. Imagine them being here. Imagine what they look like. Imagine what they sound like, right? Imagine their facial features. Okay, get them in your mind. Okay. Now I want you just to write down the 5 things, the 5 traits that they exhibit that you admire the most. And I don't care what culture you're in, right? I don't care who you're talking with. Those 5 things will almost always be similar, right? It's like they're honest. They care about me. They have compassion. They respect me. It's all the same. So that's what I mean when I say good man, right? You're modeling, you're being a good person. You're showing them that every single day. And that has more influence than you can ever know. Just like the people that influenced you and Ben, they didn't know at the time, right? They didn't know like where you're at today and how successful you are. You didn't do that on your own. That's a product of community. That's a product of all those little. I have a friend, a colleague, Gordon Graham. He's a risk management expert in the law enforcement space, right. And he's working on this concept of a bow thruster. He's a nautical guy. He's actually got his captain's license now, but he likes to pilot his boat. And I didn't know this, but he told me that, you know, the modern boats, you have these little bow thrusters and they help you kind of dock the boat. It can make incremental 1-degree corrections, you know, whereas if you're using the normal steering mechanisms, I've exhausted my nautical lexicon here. If you're using the normal steering mechanisms, those are for bigger movements, right? These little bow thrusters, like little 1-degree movements here or there, they kind of help you move the boat incrementally. You know, he's got this concept he's writing about people in his life that were bow thrusters. You know, we think about the big people, like the Chad Hills in the world, right? But there's people that I meet, people that you meet, people, Ben, that you meet that have helped you kind of course correct a little bit at a time, right? They're giving you feedback or an alternative perspective, right? Or support just a little bit here and there. And they're just kind of ticking you back on azimuth when you drift off, right? How many of those people? Well, those people in my mind, those people are just as responsible for your success as anything that you did as an individual. What do you think of that?
No, I think it's huge. I think it's funny. The package those people come in is typically not what we expect, or usually not what we ask for.
Talk about that, Ben. Talk about that. Talk about that.
No, I mean, going back to this idea of bring me your problems, I'm going to solve that. We have constant access to people in our lives who are coming to us with those little lessons, those little opportunities. And often because we are unwilling to accept it or to give them permission to participate with us. I think it's wild if we had the ability to kind of track the number of opportunities we walk past every day to be a better person, to have more courage, to show up in some different ways. I think those folks are around us, but they're usually in this bundle of annoying, distracting, whatever else, given our mindset of the moment, right? I mean, the reality is that they're always there. Yeah.
Yeah. Jack and I were talking about this the other day with a group of leaders who were saying, look, I'm so tired of dealing with complaints. I'm nonstop complaints. Like, well, let's look at that from an outward mindset. Let's reframe what it means to receive complaints. People complain about what they care about. Complaining people are not as bad as it can get because at least they're still engaged. It's the people that go quiet, right? That just have a lot of built up resentment and they just simply disengage. Those are the people that tank your organization. People that are complaining care. You have to separate, Ben, to your point, the signal from the noise.
Yeah.
You know, this is coming to me in a context, perhaps this information, or in a medium that I might not fully appreciate because it's caustic, right? It feels caustic, it feels personal. But once I can separate that, that's the noise, to your point. The signal is they truly care about this issue. Cool. Let's get to the bottom of that. And the issue, it's hardly ever what they're complaining about. You got to work at getting down to the root, right? And I like that idea. You're right. Like we got to be open to don't kill the messenger and don't become resentful because of the way it's delivered. Really listen for the message. That's transformative. I really like that bit.
I think it's interesting. We've got this, maybe it's not just our culture, other cultures maybe as well. But I think there is an entitlement that we've got within our communities of people and opportunities are going to come on this platter and this opportunity. And as soon as we give our first swing at it, their job is to say, thanks, that was incredible. That was amazing. Dad, that was the best pep talk ever. Why did you wait so long to give that to me? I think there's these moments where we expect for it to be a 3-step process and we're all back on track and we're all going to be great. Yeah.
No, you got to work. That's part of leadership is working to reveal that goodness, right? I remember a story I read one time about Michelangelo as the Pope commissioned him to create the statue of David in Florence, right? And if you haven't seen the statue of David, I haven't seen it in person yet. It's definitely on my list of things to do, but everyone's seen replications of it or images of it. It's just it's just incredible that a person could create something like that. And the story that I read was something like the Pope asking Michelangelo, tell me the secret of your genius. How did you create this work of all works? And Michelangelo said, well, it was simple. I just removed everything that wasn't David. So he took this block of marble, right? He removed everything that wasn't David. David lived in that block in his mind, and he uncovered all the extraneous stuff to reveal David. And it goes back to the point Brad's making, or the point that Ben's making, Brad, is this point that you got to work. You got to clear away all that other stuff. You got to see through that fog. You got to pierce that veil. That's the work of leadership. And it's all about how you frame it. Like it's a mindset issue. It's always a mindset issue. How do I frame this up? Is this going to be a roadblock or an opportunity to practice another virtue, right? And I love that idea. It's just a framing thing, right? You don't see the world as it is. I think it was Leo Roston that said that. You don't see the world as it is. You see the world as you are.
Well, I think there's a piece that you're making a point, and I'll take it a tiny step further. Is it the responsibility of whose job is it to remove the fluff or to pierce through the noise? I think that's one of the bigger challenges as I talk with responders in our groups and individual sessions. I think we spend an inordinate amount of time waiting. When are they finally going to appreciate it? When are they finally going to say it right? When are they finally going to clarify what their needs are? How do I make sure that they get better at their work so I can finally be successful or be appreciated or whatever that might be? And I think that's a tough one. I know I've listened to a bunch of your different talks online and things like that. And I think the courage that you talk about to take that ownership and to take that additional step, and you've made a point in the past, I don't want to steal any of your thunder, but we won't have a ton of time with you. You talk about at times the cowardice that happens when we don't do that, when we wait for someone else to do our work for us.
Yeah, a friend of mine, Gus Lee, wrote a book called Courage, the Backbone of Leadership. And Gus has been a mentor of mine, I guess 20 years. It's hard to believe it's been that long. But he was the chair of character development at West Point. And among other things, he did many things. But he's an accomplished author. And we talk a lot about that concept of courage. And oftentimes we think the opposite of courage is fear, right? But that's not true. Fear is just an emotion courage overcomes. The opposite of courage is indifference.
Mm-hmm.
When I simply don't care enough to do the right thing, right? Once you care enough, right? If we were together in person today and I offered you $50 to run across the parking lot and jump through the plate glass window in front of the building, would you do it for $50?
Depending on how bad I needed the money.
Yeah, I said Brad do it for 10, easy.
Yeah.
I'll call BS because it doesn't cover your copay. Like, I know what kind of insurance plans you got. Like, there's no way $50 cover your copay. Most people wouldn't do it. Like, they just no, it's not enough money. They don't care enough about the $50 to risk killing themselves, quite frankly, going through a plate glass window. But now if you change the scenario and you say the person you care about most in this world is trapped in the building's on fire, and in my hypothetical, the only way you get to them is crashing through the window. Are you going?
Absolutely.
Without a second thought. You need no other incentive.
Right.
Why? Because your care, concern, compassion, and love for that person overcomes your fear of crashing through a window into a burning building. So the opposite of courage is indeed indifference. Once we care enough, we'll do the right thing. So here we are, we're thinking about these people that just don't get it. They don't see how much I care. And they're not picking up what I'm putting down. They're not smelling what I'm stepping in, right? And we're getting frustrated about it. Why? We're making it about us. At the end of the day, when I care about them enough, that stuff ceases to matter. Right. I'm just doing what's right because it's right, not just for me, but for everyone. And then ultimately, I can let go of the outcome. I focus on my process. And we use the word cultivate, I think, when we talked earlier. We used the word cultivate, talking about relationships. It is like gardening. There's a natural process that governs the growth of anything you plant, right? You can't rush it. I can't yell at a crop to grow faster, but I can water it and I can make sure it has light. I make sure I use quality seeds. I can break up the hard soil. I can do all of those things metaphorically, also in relationships. It's the process of cultivation. And eventually it's going to bloom. Look, it's going to bloom no matter what. But your process and how you're cultivating it will determine what kind of fruit that relationship bears. That's a lot of gardening metaphor there, isn't it? I was heady on the gardening metaphor.
Just write them out.
But I do believe that there's a investment that has to be made. If I go back to that kind of original portion of our conversation, there's an investment that has to be made in this leader. If now we're talking about leadership of the people that you're serving, because that's what a true leader does. That's not a manager. A leader serves his people. A manager runs his people, obviously. But the investment in those people, as you're sitting here unpacking this, I'm recalling a pretty significant scenario, and I think I shared some of it with you. I was called back to repair a unit, and chief asked me if I'd come back. And the quickest way to align a group is pain, and it's not the most productive, but it's the quickest. And there was a certain amount of that had to be. I had to get this. We ended up in the papers. It was a bad deal. So it was getting some things in order, and it wasn't quite to the Kansas City SWAT level, but we did make the papers. Fired some people. However, my thought process was I have to get them in line quick, but I have to very quickly start investing in these people again and finding who my leaders are, who my ground floor leaders, who can influence, who can make change, who can actually get the qualities that I want out of this team produced in a short enough amount of time so that we don't hit the papers again. But this investment of into people, man, the payoff for that was amazing. And that actually has produced some amazing friendships now, because some of those people that were on the team then, I didn't know they were new enough. Here's just an old crusty SWAT commander coming back to the table. He's going to be a dick. He's going to, wool us around, which I did. But then in short order, it was, he cares about us. He wants the best for us, and we're doing this. So I saw that. I saw this. I mean, I lived that out of seeing this investment in people and starting to see these values rise back to the table. That's what they originally wanted. They just needed a leader who could provide that for them. Is that fair?
Yeah, it's super fair. I remember I had a drill sergeant named Earl Montgomery, and I'm a 17-year-old kid, right? Like, I had to talk my mom into signing papers so I could go in the Army, right? He was just, man, the guy was just tough. all day long tough. And, anyone's been through the military experience of basic training. I had OSUT for 26 weeks with the same drill sergeant in the same bunks. And the thing about Montgomery was he was like you were talking about, there was a lot of pain involved in the lessons that he taught, but there were just moments of connection with him where I knew that he was doing this because he cared about me and the rest of the team. And he brought the very best in me. There's nothing soft about that guy, but he brought the very best in me. I went from, my intention was to hide in the pack. Don't be first, don't be last, don't draw anybody's attention, right? I just want to make it through. That was my intention. And he saw that. Like he saw that I was half-stepping, right? He saw that. I come from a tough background, so, basic training wasn't anything to me. You're going to yell at me? What are you going to do? You going to make me do push-ups? What are you going to do? You're going to try to drown me? Okay. Like whatever, right? Bring it. And he saw I was half-stepping, and he wouldn't tolerate it, would not tolerate it. And I got the sense that he really cared about me and getting the best out of me. I ended up graduating, distinguished honor graduate from that program, from that 26-week program. And I mean, so from going from hiding in the back to half-stepping to really giving my best and seeing that pay off in terms of that recognition, which I owed everybody in the company. I owed everybody for that. But Drill Sergeant Montgomery, I don't even know if he's still alive today. If you're out there, Drill Sergeant Montgomery, if you're out there, thank you. Thank you for being one of those people, for sure, that, to Brad's point, was tough, but I knew they cared. Yeah. It's a way of being thing, right? It's not like I can see past the behavior to your way of being. Like you're giving me what I need, not what I want.
Right. Well, I want to push us back a little bit to this moment in the car, because I think we're talking a lot about your development. You're there. It's tough. You've handled all sorts of things, and we've talked a little bit about how your mindset has evolved up to this point, and you're faced with this challenge of a piece of feedback from your son. I want to make sure we don't miss that moment, because I think of a lot of our listeners, they are often misunderstood parents. Feel like they're giving it all. They're tired. They're exhausted. As we talk on the mental health side of things, they're depleted. They're stressed. They just are in a moment like that, and they're looking at what could be one other failure that just might be the last one they can put up with. So take us back to that moment for a second, because I think obviously we'll have a chance to talk more about some of these leadership concepts and some of these other pieces. But what helped you see that moment for what it was and cut through some of the noise that you might have brought to the situation?
Yeah, I mean, I would like to say that moment transformed me into the dad that I should have been, but it didn't, right? Mm-hmm. It hit me hard enough that it caused me to rethink kind of my philosophy on fatherhood and my approach. But in short order, I was able to justify it away. Sure. Like, he's just a kid. He doesn't get it. I had all these justifications, right? If he saw things from my perspective, hell, I even managed to blame my own dad. I even managed to say, if I had a better dad, then I would have, look at my, and by the way, I'm twice as good as he is. But I mean, I even brought him into it. I colluded with my dad for years after he died. I blame my dad for so much, like that I did wrong in relationships, not just in the family, but it was my dad. I could always lay it off on him, right? If I hadn't been so abused and mistreated, I could be a better person in these situations. I did that for years. Well, that's perhaps another story, but resolving that collusion with my dead father was a true transformative moment. This moment with Chris in the car, it was enough of a shot to the heart, like it dinged that armor that you take that moment combined with other moments like that invite me to self-reflect. And it's like a period of time that hard shell erodes. It's not like I just take it off and throw it down, and now all of a sudden I'm a person who cares about people. But it's like little incremental interactions with people of character, like my son in that conversation, people who are willing to be honest regardless of the cost. Like they're ready to yield to the truth no matter what it costs them. It all aggregates. It's like James Clear in his book, Atomic Habits, talks about this concept of, he wasn't the first one to talk about it, but he talks about this concept of the aggregation of marginal gains. That's how I see this transformation happening in my life, is these little 1% in conversations that I'm having and challenges that I'm facing all end up aggregating, and they compound. It's not a linear escalation. They compound in kind of crazy ways, right? So it wasn't in that car, like it hit me right in the heart. I was in the right, like it was just, whatever,
Right.
Everything came together to allow that to pierce me a little bit. And then more of those interactions. I mean, when you look at your life and you're like, okay, I'm destroying marriages. My kids won't talk to me. People at work only do what I say when I'm standing over them. At some point, the math is, what's the common denominator in all these relationships? I mean, the math's staring you in the face, right? It's not difficult. Like, it's pretty straightforward. And at some point, now look, if my justifications are powerful enough, I can still ignore that. And I did for years, but eventually it's like, whoa, I'm at a choice point here. Like, what do I want my life to be, and how do I want to impact these folks around me? It ends up just, that moment in the car. I owe Chris. I owe so many people, but I owe Chris for touching my heart that day and giving me enough, of a push, right? Just another little push in the right direction. But look, I'll say this. Look, my father. Look, I think people out there that are listening to this, we might all be struggling. A lot of times, we find ourselves in relationships with people. Like we find ourselves mired in difficult relationships at work, at home, right? With people on the road, on the way to work. Like, we find ourselves in kind of in conflict with other people, and we think it's about the proximate relationships, the things that are happening right in the moment. But like in my case, it wasn't. I was exporting my way of being with my father, my way of resenting him and blaming him into my new relationships. It was such a habit to go back and blame my old man that I could blame anybody in the moment for anything that was going wrong. And no matter how much I worked on resolving those collusions I found myself in with other people, we were inviting dysfunction in one another. I could fix one here and one there and one there, but it was like knocking the tops off of dandelions. Once I went back and actually confronted that collusion with my father, and he's dead at the time I did it, right? Once I was actually able to go to his grave and just simply acknowledge his humanity and forgive him, right? To actually forgive him. I've been carrying around so much blame and hatred and resentment for him all these years. Even after he died, I was doing it. It was killing me and killing all my relationships. I had to lay it down, right? But then also to seek his forgiveness, to actually say, look, Dad, and I never called him Dad when he was alive. I called him Vern, right? Vern. But I called him Dad. I said, Dad, I need you to forgive me too. I need you to forgive me too. What you did was on you. You're culpable for what you did. But culpability and responsibility aren't the same thing. You're culpable for what you did to me, but I'm responsible for what I did with what you did to me. Right. And what I did was blame every bad thing that I ever had happen in my life on you. And every bad decision I ever made on you. That wasn't on you. You mistreated me, but I also mistreated you, right? And that act, being able to do that, oh my goodness, that was, if the conversation with Chris was a 1-degree bump, that was like a 50-degree bump, right? That was such a freeing, I could enter into relationships in a totally different way, right? I didn't have that resentment and blame kind of front loaded.
It's freedom.
Yeah. Freedom, brother. Yeah, Brad, talk about that. What do you mean?
Well, it resonates with me because there's two things that come to mind. One is this, the more recent, AA journey. I know I'm not supposed to say AA openly, but the 12 steps give you this freedom because it owns, it gives you this ownership. What you're saying is you're taking responsibility of what your part to play was. And I think we ignore that so much. Like, we just want to blame. I just want to point the finger at your part. And if you own your part, then we'll talk about my part. And the freedom comes with, I don't care about your part. I'm going to deal with my part first. And what I found in that is there's some resolution comes with that. And part two of that, I think teeing that up for me with working the steps so hard in that, because it brought a ton of freedom, that 50-degree, whatever you're referencing there. But Jocko Willink's book, Extreme Ownership, has this concept of everything is your fault. I remember reading that as a leader and having this really hidden concept of it's not really my fault. I'm going to own it. And I want to be acknowledged for the things that go right, but I don't want to be acknowledged for the things that go wrong. And Jocko's book on extreme ownership, he just continually says, it's your fault. Everything's your fault. It's yours. You have to own it. And I remember distinctly tying those things that, because it made a formidable impression on my life, that book, and tying those things in together, and now living a life of and I just had a conversation with a Marine Corps buddy yesterday. He called me in a little bit arrears. Just, he was off. He's got, and it's a big deal, what he's off about. But my first question to him was, he said, I'm off and I need some input. And I'm one of his calls. He's one of my calls. And I'm one of his. And I said, you know what? I'm going to ask you, what part did you play? Where are you off the rails? He said, yeah, I haven't asked myself that question yet today. I said, okay, let's start there. Where are you getting off? What part have you played to this destruction, to this, rabbit hole that you're chasing down? And when you do that, there's the freedom that you speak of. I'm sorry that I'm taking away from your time, but this has hit a button for me, because the freedom that comes with just saying, I'm going to work on my part. And what you did with your dad, if there's ever a message that our listeners could actually jump on and hear and participate in, back this up and listen to, hit the rewind button a few times back to what was about 3 minutes here, and listen to this oration of what Chip said to free yourself and what the real cause or root of your disgruntlement in your life. It will pay off dividends. And to your point earlier, it will compound itself in growth.
Well, and I want to point out a couple of things, if you'll permit me. One, and this is more than a distinction without a difference. I had opportunity to talk to Jocko about his work on a couple of occasions, and he makes a distinction, and he does a better job of explaining this than I will, but there's a difference between blaming yourself and taking responsibility.
Right.
Right. And yes. I think what he's encouraging, right? He's not saying, he's encouraging, I may not be culpable for what is happening around me, but I'm responsible.
That's right. That was my point.
And is that fair?
That's my point. Yep.
Yeah. And the reason own it. Yeah.
Own it.
And I love that. I love that. And he's got a lot. He's got a lot to say about that. A lot of credibility on his part from actually being downrange and leading in kinetic situations. But that distinction, I think, is important for the listeners, right? And here's why I say that. I'm not splitting hairs. It's more than syntax. It's like, the problem with blaming myself is, if I can do that enough, I can convince myself that I'm just not a good person, which is another way of letting myself off the hook.
Right.
Like, I can convince myself I'm fundamentally flawed.
Right.
And you're saying to me, Chip, these are the things that I think you need to own. And I'm saying to you, how could somebody like me ever be able to do that, Brad? It's easy for you and Ben. You guys got character. Right. You guys have value. I'm worthless. So that's the problem with blaming yourself, right? You convince yourself it's another way of evading responsibility. I can evade it by putting myself above it all, like I'm too good for this, or putting myself below it all. I could never.
Right.
Right. So that distinction, I think, is worth thinking about. This isn't we're not going to, it's not self-flagellation. We're going to beat ourselves up. The fact of the matter, to your point, when I'm responsible for something, I'm able to respond. I have power. I love what you said. I have freedom. And then the other thing that I was going to say is, you just uncovered the secret to organizational change. When we talk about the work that Arbinger does with organizations, is we help them see that organizational change is predicated on individual change. To the degree that our team members are willing to accept responsibility, the organization can change. It changes the entire culture. Personal responsibility is a predicate for that type of collective responsibility that we need in organizations who want to hold themselves accountable for results and for improvement. What we're doing in a lot of organizations is we're just pointing the finger. Like, I would do a better job if Ben's team would get their stuff together.
Yeah.
I've got a perfect excuse for doing less than my best. The crazy part is, and this is a crazy dynamic in these dysfunctional relationships, I will say that I'm doing less than my best because of what Ben's team has failed to do for me. The truth is, I'm seizing on what Ben's team has failed to do for me because I'm doing less than my best. That's what's happening, right?
Right.
Yeah, and so I actually am invested now in Ben's team being dysfunctional. I need them to be as bad as I say they are, because it lets me off the hook.
Right.
Back to Brad's point, it allows me to evade responsibility. Yeah.
Let me give my mental health 2 seconds. I think that that self-blame, I talk to folks who are years into it. They don't realize that they've backed themselves and ironically have built this monument of shame and disappointment and sadness, and they can't quite make sense of it because they're like, well, I don't feel depressed. I don't think I should be depressed. But welcome to a lot of the first responders that we work with who are feeling suffocated. And I think it's some of these small little movements that kind of accumulate over time of they need someone to blame. And sometimes it is themselves. And it's not in the ownership sort of way. It's the, I'm going to pile on these completely unrealistic ideas. I'm going to hide this resentment. I'm not going to talk about it. I'm not going to, face it. But I think there's a lot of folks who feel incredibly alone and discouraged. And ironically, they've built this thing that weighs them down. And it's a tough one when you're in the middle of it to see. But I love that you're pointing out that is a process that we do, obviously unintentionally, that obviously keeps us in some situations pretty sick.
Well, and that's the self-deceptive piece is it appears unintentional, but we do have a goal. We're just hiding the goal from ourselves, right?
Right.
Oh, we have more influence than anybody else. Yeah.
Well, 100%, right? It's a self-deceptive way of entering into that relationship with other people. Look, so you would probably enjoy this book. There's a book called Outlive by Dr. Peter Attia. And the book is incredible. It's an incredible bit of work around wellness and longevity. But the last chapter, he comes out of nowhere in the last chapter and he hits the mental health component. And he's super transparent, kind of like we've all been here today. He's super transparent about his struggle and his experience with mental health challenges. And this is a highly successful person, right? He's got a podcast. I think it's called Driven. He's the authored, book. This book's amazing. But man, his transparency, his honesty about his mental health struggles. And it led me to another book. He actually received some counseling from a counselor named Terrence Real, Dr. Terrence Real, right? Yeah. Led me to another book called I Don't Want to Talk About It.
Oh, yeah, it's a great one.
Right? And it's about male depression.
Yeah.
So I'm interested to hear what you liked about that book. What I liked about that book was I always thought about depression, like to your point, I don't feel depressed. Like I thought about depression kind of one-dimensionally. Like, well, people that are depressed, and because of my particular disposition, I've never experienced it, right? But I remember my mom not being able to get out of bed for a couple of days at a time. That's how I always thought about depression. But Terrence talks about, man, in men especially, and this book's really about men. In men, depression can manifest in all these crazy ways. What was your biggest takeaway from that book?
One of the first chapters, I'll comment real quickly, and I want to make sure we get back to where we were heading earlier. What I love about some of the early chapters is a combination of him helping to reframe this concept of ego, but his definition of depression for men is what he refers to as covert depression. It's still depression in the internal message of I'm a piece of shit. I'm never going to be okay. Regardless of what I have, I'm not going to be enough. Things are not going to get better. So it's this lose-lose that we bring with us into all situations. And his point was in men, they are so determined to hide the truth of this internal message that we keep on replaying in our heads that we convert it into high performance, to overtime, into addictive, controlling, manipulative behaviors, and to basically get everybody off the scent that there is a self-worth crisis happening. And we're really struggling with the vocabulary or even the ability to kind of point to it. But his book kind of goes through some different pieces of that. But I really like that message of we're all kind of in the same boat. We're all struggling. He does a good job of humanizing it, but he says some of us are really committed to making sure that we don't get humanized. I think, and I'd probably point back a little bit to what you had mentioned earlier. Sometimes our training is too good and translates in some pretty toxic ways.
Yeah. You can weaponize it. You can weaponize your training like you can weaponize your way of being. Right, Brad?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Hey, for our listeners, I want to point out these two books again.
Yeah. So you want to name them, Ben, or you want?
I'm not sure the author on the Outlive. But,
Outlive, Dr. Peter Attia, Attia is my memory. And then the book that actually Ben, you summarized that book beautifully, by the way. Like you hit on all these high points. That book is called I Don't Want to Talk About It by Dr. Terrence Real, Real. Those are the two books we were just discussing. And again, for your audience, for everybody listening. And I know, like, I run across more and more people these days that are a little want to read, and they feel like, well, I don't have a lot of time to read. I'm always moving, right? We're in a society now that's always moving, but it's worth your investment. And one way that I tackle reading is I just commit to no 0 days.
Right.
So like some days I'll read less than I
Yep.
want to read, but I read something every day.
That's right.
And I just took down a book. There was a book, a colleague of mine, retired Captain Greg Meyer, LAPD. He just wrote a book called Hard Cases, and it's on police use of force. And he was a consultant on a couple of different cases, the George Floyd case and, Rodney King. And, he wrote this book, and I tackled it. There's a lot of information. I just tackle it. I'm reading one chapter a day. And there were some days I read 2 pages, but that's okay. I just hit it every day. Next thing you know, I've read the entire book, and that just came out, I think early this month. So Greg Meyer's book's a good book for folks that are into, use of force trainers, things like that. You should definitely read that. But the other thing I would volunteer, talking to you guys is so fun, by the way. The other thing I would volunteer would be Audible. Like, this isn't new to anybody, but these audio books. I went on a walk yesterday, and I wanted to revisit some work by Keegan and Leahy. They talk about organizational culture change. And I got it on Audible and plugged this book in. It's called Immunity to Change, by the way. It's a good book. But I plugged this book in, and I'm walking my dogs. And I'm literally an hour, I got a couple chapters under my belt of this book while I'm walking my dogs. So for those of you that are reluctant, but the books that Ben and I were just talking about, there's so much good reading out there. But I mean, for people in this profession, right? People that are in the high stress professions, I think we got to take care of ourselves. And I think it's becoming more and more a thing, right? I was at the last ICP conference. Every meeting, the chiefs were talking about, the execs were talking about how do we support our people? In the world of firefighters, in the world of police, in the world of paramedics, emergency medical technicians, how do we support our people? They're taking care of everybody all the time. How do we help them take care of themselves, right? It's like on the plane, when the planes, I shouldn't be talking about this, I'm getting ready to fly over the Atlantic, but I mean, before, if the plane starts having a problem, they always say, put your mask on first before you help your neighbor.
Right.
It's right. Well, how do we help these folks that are giving everything to society to help themselves, right? Get yourself right. Do some reading. If you got to talk to somebody, talk to somebody. If it's your battle buddy, like to Brad's point, if it's a clinician, people are want to go to clinicians too. I feel like I'm taking this down a rabbit hole myself, but people are want to go to clinicians because they feel like, well, that's a sign of weakness. And, look, all a clinician is somebody who's trained to listen objectively, non-judgmentally, to just have unconditional regard for you as a person. So you could tell your story. And, oh, by the way, they can't tell anybody.
Right.
Right? It's like, unless you're going to hurt people or yourself, they can't tell anybody. So you could say whatever and unpack it all. And just unpacking it, I think people know their answers sometimes. What they really need is someone that's safe so they can formulate the problem.
Right.
And then they can better see kind of the path and you take forward. So there's a plug for books. There's a plug for clinicians.
Nice
I get no money from this. I get no money from these monster drinks.
Way to go. Plugging it all.
Plugging it all.
Nice
You're
job,
going to edit that out. You're going to edit out. You're going to edit that out.
You'll get your nickel.
Hey, let's segue back to Arbinger. You just brought it up a few minutes ago, and we've talked around this pretty much the entire conversation, but I want to be intentional about talking about some mindset stuff. I really want to give you that freedom, that platform to just let's be intentional about Arbinger Institute. What do they bring to the table? How do you impact people with your message as their senior consultant? Yeah, well, and since we're talking about coming out of a conversation about reading and books, Arbinger has authored 3 international best-selling books. Leadership and Self-Deception, which is what first turned me on to Arbinger's work, The Anatomy of Peace, right, and
then The Outward Mindset. And The Outward Mindset has the first chapter deals with a bit of my story in SWAT, and those books are a great gateway to our work. They're very well written, and they kind of open people up to these ideas, deeply philosophical ideas like self-deception and self-betrayal, right? But they open them up to them in a very accessible way. The thing that Arbinger specializes in is really bringing humanity back to the workplace, helping people connect human to human in a meaningful way, helping them realize the truth about other people and better understand, appreciate, and account for the impact they're having on folks as they're going about doing their job, right? So, I mean, the thing that Arbinger does, like those concepts aren't like everybody that hears me say that, I'm just riffing. I'm not reading off, a script or anything. I'm just talking about this kind of colloquially. But everybody that hears those words, they can get on board with that. Like, yeah, okay, that makes sense to me conceptually. But then what do I do? And what we do with our training is we equip them with a language to talk about some of these issues and challenges, and we help them just see more clearly their role in helping the organization improve. And we also help kind of, well, I like to say, blur that line between personal and professional, in the sense that this is about a deeper aspect of my interactions with other people. It's deeper than professional or personal. It's deeper than behavior. It's about my actual way of being with other people in all those contexts. And I would offer to you, you can put on whatever face you want to put on and whatever context you want to put on. There's a core you that constantly goes wherever you go, and it goes into all, and it's effective or active in all those relationships. We talk about that deeper level. Like, how am I actually with a person? How do I actually regard or not regard? In what ways am I taking for granted the humanity of other people around me, or totally oblivious to it and just kind of operate in a vacuum? So Arbinger's work is like, that's it. That's the work. And our mission is to turn the world outward, meaning what? We want to help everybody that we can possibly help, the entire world, start to see differently, because we know that once you see differently, you're going to start doing some things differently that are going to be helpful. The thing that drew me to Arbinger was the uniqueness. Like, we're always, I've went through thousands and thousands of hours of training. I've delivered thousands and thousands of hours of training about what to do. But Arbinger helps me better understand who I am in what I do. And that actually is what influenced. We noticed that in the SWAT team, right? People weren't responding to what we were doing, kicking in doors, taking people to jail, recovering evidence, all those things. They were responding to how they were feeling seen by us while we were doing it. And once we changed that, what we were doing didn't matter so much. The complaints evaporated. Why? Because they understood. Everybody understands. Even career criminals understand. We've all got a role to play here, but how can we do it in a way that honors their humanity, right? That's the key. And it's not like a hug-a-thug program, right? Where everybody's like, well, we're just not going to arrest people anymore. We're going to be indulgent and condoning and make excuses. No, that's robbing people of responsibility. We're going to make sure the responsibility lands right where it should, on that person for the choices they made. Hard on the problem, passionate with the person, right? Like, that's the idea. This is still a person I'm dealing with. Oh, and by the way, I'll tell you guys this. I've been honest about this. I was arrested twice before I was 16, right? For violence. And so who am I to sit here, right? And people are like, I remember cops getting so mad when people would run from them. I'm like, yeah, I can't say I haven't ran from the police.
I ran twice.
Right, you too?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So my point is, where do we get, like, when that high horse gets uncomfortable, we just need to climb off of it, right? Like, once that starts feeling a little bit, right, we need to get down, because, like, once you realize that, it's like, what? Yeah, but that was different. I had a good reason. Really?
Yeah.
Right.
Like that person doesn't think they have a good reason. So, like, I can say this was a powerful thing we realized at SWAT. Arbinger helped us see this. Is like, I can understand behavior without condoning it. I can seek to understand why someone would be out on the corner selling drugs without condoning the behavior.
Right.
Like, I can understand that if I've got a kid who grew up, he never met his dad, he lives in an impoverished neighborhood, his mother's addicted to crack cocaine, he sleeps on the floor of his bedroom because he's worried if he sleeps in his bed, some stray bullet's going to come through the wall and kill him in his sleep, and he can't make it to school with his tennis shoes. If that's his reality, can I understand why he might think it'd be okay to join a gang for protection?
Absolutely.
100% I can. Doesn't mean I condone it. It doesn't mean I'm not going to drive him to the Army recruiter if he'll permit me to. It doesn't mean that I'm not going to let the natural consequences trigger and introduce him into the criminal justice system if needed. But I can do that with a heart at peace. I'm not warring with this young man. Right. And I'm not judging him. I'm not looking down on him. So you ask about what Arbinger does. Arbinger's work changes the world. I mean, I'm not trying to, like, think about this ordinarily. There's a lot of great training, a great philosophy out there, but this is life changing. This is why I do this, right? This is why I'm so committed to it, because it's changed my life profoundly and the lives of people that I've impacted. And I'm still on the journey. I've been doing this work now for 16, 17 years intentionally, and I'm probably batting 70%. Man, I mean, there's like 30% of the time I'm still like dropping the ball, but I'm committed to helping people as best I can to understand this work in a way that's practical and useful to them. It helps them live better. It's not navel gazing. This is practical philosophy that can help you be better in all aspects of your life. Okay, you wanted me to talk about it. I probably exhausted you there.
No, not at all. I do want us to frame out maybe some real life examples of what some of that looks like. I think for me, I'll tee it up by saying that it wasn't Arbinger at the time, but it's a semblance of it. I remember as a rookie, I was on field training and pulled over a pickup, and there was the pickup, back end of the pickup was full of kids. It was clear that they were, lower income. There was some groceries in there. There's a little girl that was eating a bologna sandwich. And when I pulled this guy over, he had a suspended license. He didn't have insurance, and, his tag was out, and, all the things that a rookie's just, wide-eyed. I got a good one here. And my break-in partner, as I go back and I'm going to start doing my due diligence and writing tickets as a good trooper, I see my break-in partner over there talking to the guy. This little girl tore off the edges she didn't want to eat the outside edges of the sandwich, right? And she tore them off, threw them on the ground. The dad picked those up off the ground and put them in his overalls pocket. As I'm watching this take place, my break-in partner pulls out his billfold and hands the guy a $20 bill. Puts his wallet back up and comes back and sits down in the car and says, "I don't know about you, but my conscience is clean." And therein starts the lesson, right? I'm like, holy cow, here's a human that I'm fixing to impose, I don't know, several $100s on this guy when he's picking up breadcrumbs to feed his family. And in that moment, I think this is a little bit about what we're talking about. In that moment, we see, okay, there's something beyond what's happening here of just a misdemeanor violation act of breaking the law. There's a moment, there's a critical moment here to be human, to interact as a human. I'm going to tee that up for you.
What can I say to that, brother? I mean, that's amazing. And it's not the act of giving the $20, right? Whether he gives that money or doesn't give that money, it's the act of him considering that human being across from him outside of the context of him being a violator, right?
Right.
Like of seeing a person.
Right.
Right. Yielding to the truth about that individual and doing what the truth demands of him in that moment. And it happened to manifest that he gave him $20. It could have manifested 100 different ways.
Right.
It's still been so authentic. It's such an amazing story. The thing about conscience we have to be careful of, I will say that conscience is a way of kind of monitoring ourselves, like keeping track of whether or not we're living according to our values. But it's an internal mechanism, which means it can be corrupted too. If I start disregarding the person of other people around me, it's just I have to be careful with that, right? I can actually make myself feel guilty enough that I feel justified. Like the idea would be, I don't do the thing I think is right. I beat myself up about it enough, and I convince myself that because I feel guilty, I'm a good person, and I can just move on, right? I mean, that sounds like a bit of psychological gymnastics there, but no, your story is just, there's something there that, what a powerful, and that was your break-in. You remember that
Distinctly, like yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like Gordon would say, a little bow thruster. That person was for you.
There's a piece of this that I want to comment on real quick. It is, you said something earlier, a minute or two ago, about that realignment process of us reconnecting with kind of who we are, our integrity, some of those deeper pieces. And as you were given a bit of a pitch for Arbinger, I'm considering our listeners, and there are a wide range of folks, right? Some never considered therapy. Some have maybe done a ton. Maybe some people are leaving a pretty significant experience. And I think that at our core, as a mental health professional, that's the core of this whole process. Whole process is, how do we rehumanize ourselves? How do we reconnect with other people? And how do we, regardless of the situation, how do we get really aggressive about the problem and make sure we take it as seriously, honestly as possible, while still offering some compassion and support? And I think sometimes we assume, especially in service professions, that the only way I can demonstrate my values is to be of service and to take tons of responsibility for other people's behavior. And I think that's a tough one for a lot of our law enforcement folks who are towards the end of their career trying to figure out, well, what's left. I'm moving on from my career. I'm retiring. Do I really have any opportunities to provide service? And if that's the only way I know how to align and to basically demonstrate my values is that kind of service, they feel very stuck and very discouraged sometimes. So I just love this idea of how do we get really honest about the problem? How do we be compassionate? And it might be this person on the road, and at the other times it's going to be at the kitchen table, or it might be in the mirror. And people sometimes think that's not the work. And I just want to clarify what you said is powerful. And that's the opportunity that we all have every day.
Yeah. Well, Ben, what you're saying is powerful. It's like the key is captured in the title of your podcast, No One Fights Alone. That's not just a trope, man. That's not just a catchphrase. Like that is the secret to transcending all these things that are breaking my heart and eating away at my soul. No one fights alone. We are not alone. And there's this paradox that exists. It's difficult for us to talk about, right? I use a lot of metaphors sometimes. Shout out to my buddy, Michael Lazan, by the way. He doesn't like metaphors, so I always make sure I throw a few in for him. So Michael, if you're listening, another metaphor for you, buddy. He's such a practical dude. That dude is so smart. He's such a practical, straightforward dude. If I were capable of communicating like him, then I wouldn't need metaphors. But when I think about no one fights alone, it's like this paradox. So you think about a stand of aspen trees out there where you're at, Ben, right? Brad, the stand of aspen trees. When you go into a stand of aspen trees, you experience that as a group of individual trees. And I think the biggest stand actually is in Utah. The biggest stand's 106 acres in Utah, the Pando stand, I think. But so my experience of that stand of trees is all these individual trees. But if you go under the surface, you find that those trees are all connected by one common root system. That's one organism. The largest organism on the planet is a stand of aspen trees. So I think that's how we are. You talk about no one fights alone. We are two things at the same time. We are a community of individuals with unique capacities and unique aspects and unique ways of seeing things, but we're an organism. We're all wired together inextricably in this fabric we call humanity. We're stitched together. We can't bust free. Right? We're all together in this thing. We're not alone. We're two things at the same time, a community and an organism. And once we understand that, I can't hurt me without hurting you. And I can't help you without helping me. And we need to do a better job of transitioning people out of these professions, these service professions. Start, forecasting. I know someone's coming to the end of their time and we're going to wind them down. We're going to find other ways, help them cultivate other interests, other ways of serving. I don't think service ever stops. We're at our best. We're at our best when we're helping other people, but finding a way to continue to give. I think that's what keeps us, that you talk about contributing to longevity. There's the largest longitudinal study on, well, as far as I know, on human, I don't know how to capture it. I don't think it's just longevity. It's health span more than lifespan. But the largest study, it's a Harvard study, and they've been doing this for decades and decades, but they track all of these people in the study group, 1,000 people, and they track them, and they're into their second and third generation now of tracking people. The number one determinant of healthy, long lives, happy lives, is relationships. Quality relationships is the number one determinant. Better than what you eat, where you live, if you're in a blue zone, how much you exercise. The number one predictor of someone living a healthy, happy life, according to the study, is relationships. How do we keep people in healthy relationships, finding ways for them to serve after they've stepped away from being compensated for serving, right? What can we do to start involving them? Because it never stops. No one fights alone. That's true. But the fight doesn't end. It just doesn't have to be like, sometimes we're fighting the wrong thing. Like sometimes we're right. We're in the wrong battle. We're not even in the right battle. Right. And once I yield, sometimes the key is, right, like a lot of the Eastern philosophy around conflict, the key is yielding. The key is simply yielding more than it is doubling down or trying to force my paradigm. Okay, well,
there's a book. There's a Excommunicated Warrior by Nick Kumalatis. He's a MARSOC guy. He speaks to this disconnect retirement. He's a, SF guy, but one of the things he spoke about in that book, and it really resonates, and I ended up watching some YouTube stuff on his, but it's just to what you're speaking, which is this, find something that you're passionate about, find your passion and be intentional about it, and then go do it. And I think so many times people just start to come off the rails a little bit. They don't know what they're passionate about, or if they do, they don't know how to start it, or they have some type of fear or something that prevents them from saying, yeah, that's probably what I need to be doing. However, this disengagement part of this, being part of this community, when you feel disconnected or disengaged, you feel a little bit lost. And this finding something passionate, to your point, go, what are you passionate about? Go do it. This is what's going to keep you alive and connected and involved and living out of, post-retirement or disconnected, whatever you're disengaging from. It was a powerful message. Great book. Great book.
Yeah. It's sometimes we can objectify ourselves by basically over identifying with our role, or we can make our identity like I know a lot of police, for instance, that have made that their identity.
Right.
Sure.
And then when they retire, well, what am I now?
Yeah.
It's like, no, that's something you did. That isn't who you are. Right. I love that idea. Arthur Brooks wrote a book. I can't recall the title right now, but Arthur Brooks is the author. And he talks about this idea of the second curve, exactly what you're talking about, Brad, is finding okay, where do we, as we start our natural decline, people that are our age are already in this thing, right? As we start that natural decline in intellectual ability and, just generally we hit our peak at some point, earlier than we'd like to, and we start to kind of decline. How do we find purpose? How do we find meaning, to your point? How do we find something we can value and invest in? I wish I could recall the name of the book, but it's Arthur Brooks, and you could probably Google it or DuckDuckGo it. I don't want to give all that shade to Google, DuckDuckGo it. But
well, I want to circle us back to something here. I want to circle us back a little bit to Arbinger, because I really feel like this is a valuable part of a message to our listeners of what are practical ways. And I started down this road a while ago, and I ended up telling that story. But what are some practical ways of getting started for our listeners of getting started in Arbinger? I know you mentioned the books. The books are great. The Leadership and Self-Deception. That's my favorite. But what are some practical ways of getting started within this concept?
Yeah, I would invite anyone to go to our websites, www.arbinger.com. It's Arbinger. It's like Harbinger without the H, right? Arbinger. So you go to arbinger.com, and the first thing I would do is I'd set up a consultation. It doesn't cost you anything to do that, right? You set up a consultation, and then we have someone call you, someone from our team that can get real specific about the things that are challenging you, right? So, it's not a one size fits all prescription. They really want to know, how are you being challenged? What are the things you're struggling and contending with?
Right.
Then we can right size the response, right? We want to know, how can we be helpful? How can we position you to be better able to solve your problems and your issues within your organization? That looks different, man. For some people, it's coaching. For some people, it's a workshop. Right. For some people, it's building a success plan, with a customer service specialist, with an account executive. So that's the first step for me, is that's the entree, is just let them know, let us know, what is it you're seeking help with? And that's a conversation. That's a conversation. And our goal would be to start to build a relationship. And I've got a philosophy on business. I don't know if Arbinger, how they would articulate it, right? I don't speak for all of Arbinger here, but I speak for Chip Huth, and this is the way I approach my work at Arbinger, is that if I just focus on being really helpful to people, the business part will take care of itself. I never think about selling. I only think about helping people. And I find that if you really help people, the business part takes care of itself. I'm not going to miss a meal if I'm really focusing on helping other people. So I think you'll see a lot of that when you reach out. You don't see a lot of salesy stuff, right? It's just going to be okay, what's the right solution for you? And then as far as just trying to operationalize this way of working in your day to day, I'd work on one relationship. I'd pick one relationship in my life that could use a little bit of improvement. And I'd be really intentional about cultivating that relationship in a productive way, having it kind of grow toward the light, right? And just providing space for that person by dedicating some time to listening without judging. Just sitting down and have a conversation. I had a conversation the other day with somebody that I care about so much. And it was so, the conversation was so illuminating. I heard them in a totally different way at a totally different level. And as I deconstructed what went right in that conversation, it was the fact that I cared about him so darn much. Once I opened up and actually allowed myself to just care about this person, I had an ability to listen to them that I never thought I had. Because a lot of times I'm listening, I'm waiting for my turn to talk, right? Like, I'm like, okay, get to your point, Brad, because I got something great I'm going to lay on you. I'm going to give you some advice, going to knock you out of your chair, buddy. I'm not really listening, right?
Right.
I'm just, yeah.
Of course.
And that was such a different experience. Just as a way, I'm going to invite people to think about this, but just reflect on your interactions, practice gratitude, like really look around for things to be thankful for, and invest in that one relationship and just commit to listening to them without judging. And that might be a helpful way to start seeing some productive changes. But yeah, Arbinger, reach out. Maybe let
me add a quick thing to what you just mentioned. It's funny. Last week, I was in a conversation, and obviously at our facility, we work with first responder groups, and we're having this conversation, and the group was really determined to talk about culture. And most of them had lots to say around administrative betrayal and all sorts of community challenges. And as usual, the commitment typically was, can we vent? Can we talk? And people sometimes think this is what therapy is about, is you just bitch about stuff. And sometimes it is therapeutic, but most of the time it's not. But they were talking about it, and we got back to your point. And that is, there's a guy right next to you. There's a girl right next to you that's suffering, that's struggling. And the best way, you know how you can help that organization is shut up, listen, consider, sit with them, humanize them, and just give them that kind of space. And for a while, there was some folks saying, yeah, but that's not going to create enough change fast enough. And I know you've got 1,000 stories about this, but I think it's such a great point. But if we want something to really be different in our department, in our families, whatever it might be, do we have the restraint and the respect to just suspend whatever farming metaphor we have, if you're Chip? And
if you're Chip, yeah. Fair.
Anyway, my point is, I think what you just mentioned is a skill that we often forget to develop. But man, if we want to make a big splash wherever we might be, that piece of listening and gratitude, I think it's cheap, it's fast, and there's very few things more effective.
I think nothing more powerful than honoring that inextricable connection we have as human beings. Nothing more powerful than honoring that.
Right.
It's like floating downstream with the current versus fighting upstream, right? Going against it. Yeah. Such a powerful point. Such a powerful point you make. Yeah.
Chip, if we wrap this up a little bit, I think this has been absolutely a wonderful conversation, and I am so thankful for you taking the time. I know you're prepping to get on a plane to fly across the Atlantic Ocean, so you didn't have to take time out today. So I'm really grateful for your time, and we've spent for a 50-minute podcast, we are an hour and 52 minutes into this thing. So
I'm so sorry.
This has been amazing. This has been absolutely amazing. I want to give you just a closing opportunity to maybe impart any kind of wisdom, how to do life, how to first responder, just take a minute. I mean, you're well versed in this, you're well spoken across the country. You have a lot of great wisdom tidbits, and I always like giving our guests the opportunity just to kind of sum it up. If I was going to impart 1, 2, 3, 5 things, just put you on the spot here a little bit.
Yeah, brother. Yeah, I don't have a lot of wisdom. It's funny. I think you both would agree with me, Ben and Brad, on this. Like, the longer I live and the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know. I'm constantly relearning things or reconsidering things. I'm constantly growing, trying to move toward this kind of transformative mindset where I'm able to not only look at the world through my lens, but to look at the lens through which I'm looking at the world, and to start to question that lens, right? Is this paradigm still helping me and others, or is there more that I need to be adding to this? But the one thing I wear this on a little rubber bracelet. This just a reminder that every interaction matters. Every interaction you have with every single person is significant beyond your ability to appreciate the significance. And every interaction you have, regardless of context or the status of the person, right? Every interaction you have is an opportunity to build or destroy a relationship. Every interaction. And because of the way we're all bound together, Every interaction matters at multiple levels, but the way I am with you, Brad, the way I am with you, Ben, that also is the way I am with the next person I meet.
Right.
That's the way I am with my family, right? The way I am with you, I export that way of being from relationship to relationship. It becomes habitual. And if I can make a habit out of being curious and considerate and grateful, if that becomes my default, oh my power to influence, my power to change the world, man, it's immeasurable. So I don't want to be like, I think sometimes, you talked about it, Ben hit on this thing. Somebody wants to be able to hit the easy button, right? Well, I don't know how to surge trust, and neither does anybody else. And if they tell you they do, they're just lying to you.
Right.
Maybe they're self-deceived. Maybe they believe they can, but no one can. Slow is fast with people, and fast is slow with people. When you try to rush to build relationships and you don't appreciate the significance of each contact, each little investment, back to Brad's point, the aggregation of all those investments, then you're missing the boat. That's how life works. That's how life works. And look, we're always making trade-offs, always. Yes, it's going to take some time up front to listen with the intent to understand. But the benefit downrange, it's hard to calculate. Or I can have the perception of being effective by running around all the time, trying to fix everything or do everything myself or ignore everybody or minimalize people, or right. I can try to do that. And in the moment, it's going to feel really good. Like I got a lot done today. I'm exhausted. I'm wiped out. But at the end, I've left a lot of destruction in my wake. So slow is fast with people. That is the way you do it. It's like training a new SWAT guy, right? When you come in the room, don't run through the room like a maniac. You're going to miss things. Move deliberately, pick up your sight lines, track your area of responsibility, and transition smoothly. And it's the same thing as you're moving through relationships. So I don't know if that's wise, but that's the kind of thing I'm thinking about today. Every interaction matters.
That's some good old SWAT commander shit right there. Chip Huth, thank you so much for coming on. If somebody wanted to get a hold of you, I mean, like a website or email that maybe you could throw out if somebody had wanted to reach out.
Yeah, everybody can get a hold of me through Arbinger's website, but I'm also on the social medias. I'm on the LinkedIn. That's the one I'm on, really. I mean, I'm on the other ones. I just keep the other ones for when people forward me funny jokes, like or funny memes. I do. Like I got Instagram, but I only keep them so like if you send me something funny, I can open it. Like I don't really do anything on there. But the LinkedIn, I try to stay active on the LinkedIn. I don't know if you're supposed to put the in front of it. I always get made fun of for that old guy thing. But
Killing it.
LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn, as is Arbinger. And yeah, anybody that can hit me up on that, that's probably the easiest way. I probably check that at least once a day just to see what's happening. So
great.
Yeah.
So great.
Indeed.
Chip, thanks for coming on. We wish you safe travels and a absolutely wonderful time in Germany with your son and family. And hopefully maybe we can have you back on. This has been absolutely wonderful.
Wow. Bitte, as they say. Bitte.
Yes.
Thank you. Appreciate you guys. Ben, Brad, so awesome.
Yeah.
See you soon.
See you, Chip.
Chateau Health and Wellness is a 16-bed treatment facility nestled in the foothills of the Wasatch Mountains in Midway, Utah. Chateau's first responder resiliency program is designed to treat the unique challenges and issues that first responders encounter in the course of their careers. Chateau's comprehensive and highly individualized approach to treatment addresses more than just the presenting issues. It addresses the why. Each of their seasoned, trauma-trained, and culturally competent therapists utilize evidence-based, specialized therapies to treat trauma at its core and enable clients to begin the healing process while developing a resilient and healthy relationship with stress. Chateau Health and Wellness is trusted by departments and agencies from around the country to treat responders and veterans. In fact, it is one of only a handful of facilities nationwide that is vetted and approved to treat members of the Fraternal Order of Police. For more information or to speak to a representative, go to chateaurecovery.com or call 888-507-5031.